welcome Corey Stiles. Corey is the author of Grief Interrupted, a holistic guide to reclaiming your joy. Corey, I'm so excited to have you here,
to be here
at the Author Castle. Grief Interrupted, your first book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this book. What's it about? How did you get the inspiration to write it?
So this book is really for anybody who has been sort of tethered in grief for an extended period of time. There's a lot of support out there for anybody who's been grieving for the year of firsts, is what we call it.
First birthday,
first Mother's Day, first holiday. But there's not a lot of support for people who are grieving in the second, third, fourth, 10th year. And I really wanted to write this book to give people hope that no matter what your form of grief is, and there are lots of forms of grief, you really can find joy and happiness again. You can find a new normal, different than your previous normal, but just as fulfilling for where you are at this point in your life.
Yeah, such a powerful story. So Grief Interrupted is really about reclaiming joy, but one of the things I think that's so important about your message is really also honoring that grief. And that tension of opposites. So you bring a little bit of a yogini's perspective to grief.
Yes.
Talk about your background and how that influenced the message in the book.
So the reason that I wrote this book really is because I have my own story about grief. I lost my teenage daughter 12 years ago, and in the months after she passed away, I really found that yoga, I tell people this all the time, yoga saved me. It became a place for me to just really be in the presence of my own grief and not the community's grief. And when I was on my mat, often I would just sit and cry for the entirety of the class, and my yoga teacher was okay with that. But it really helped me to move the energy that is grief out of my body instead of that energy getting stuck in my body. And that's what I've seen with a lot of people that I've worked with, is that no matter what the grief is, that energy, that tension, that rolling in, that trying to protect our heart gets stuck in our shoulders, in our chest, and our hips, really throughout our body, and can manifest as tension and tightness and even dis-ease.
Yeah.
So
such a powerful message. Norman wrote in to say that everybody's female. Where are the guys? The guys are coming. Stay tuned. There are guys coming, but we're going to talk to Corey right now. One of our guests says, what's the personal story behind writing the book? Oh, I love hearing the personal story behind writing the book. What is the process from going from inspiration to published?
For the book writing process. Right. So, very interesting. I tell this story in the book. When I first talked with Angela, I had a completely different idea for writing my book. I wanted to write the happy book. And I was telling Angela my story. She just said, tell me your life story, basically. And I told her, and she said, wait a minute, go back. She said, this is really the story that you need to tell, because you can help more people by telling this story than jumping ahead into the story of happiness and joy when everything's done. So for me, really connecting with that part of my story and honoring that part of my story, I think opened up the potential in this book for me to help other people tell and honor their story.
Totally. Gina asked a super perceptive question. She said, what would you say is the biggest obstacle that kept you from writing this book sooner?
Wow, that's a personal belief in myself. I've been a writer for a long time. I love to write, but I didn't think that I could do it, number one, and I didn't think I had enough to say, to be honest. And even when I started in your program, I thought, I don't have enough to say about this, but once I started writing, the words just started to flow.
Yeah.
Clearly there was enough.
Amazing support coming through. Justine says, thank you so much for sharing your hard-earned wisdom and hope.
Yes.
Which is beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you for helping with grief. You're amazing and definitely the best SSF. I think there's some private, I don't know what an SSF is, but she is the best. I think you know what I mean.
I do.
Norman says that we just lost my father-in-law and I'm the last of my family. I'm looking forward to reading this.
Oh, thank you, Norman.
So if you have been on a journey of prolonged grief, or maybe there's just someone in your life a best friend. You have a best friend who also lost a child, right?
Interestingly, I have come in contact with about 5 other women who have lost young adult children. And yes, one of my very, very good friends that I've known for over 30 years, she lost her son 3 years after my daughter. In fact, they grew up together. We used to go camping together, and yes, she lost her son.
So maybe you have a friend like that and you have wanted to figure out how to have a conversation with them about hope or joy being possible again. Maybe it is time for you to interrupt the grief in your life. Go ahead and grab Corey Stiles, Grief Interrupted. Thank you so much for joining me on the couch.